Constellations is a play that deals with the characters of Marianne and Roland. I play Roland, a beekeeper with a heart of gold who's been stung more than once, more than just by bees. And as I'm not actually a beekeeper, I'm going to head to Nashville's Adventure Science Center to meet with Erin Castellano, a science educator and a bee enthusiast, to find out what she can tell me about the lives of bees.
Let's go talk about some bees.
All right, it's after you.
Bees are more of a hobby. My degree's in chemistry.
Is that right?
Yeah. But I really like bees. I'm at Chattanooga. There's a different science center that we did a big... now that the camera's on, I'm going to start stuttering. We had a rooftop garden. We're currently trying to make a pollinator garden for here. We just broke ground on our galactic gardens. We're going to have over 6,000 native to the U.S. pollinator plants put up there. It's very exciting stuff, working with the Nashville Area Beekeeper Association.
Very cool.
Stuff.
That's it's funny you said they're in a garden, or it's a rooftop garden that you have them in. There's something in the play about heather. Mm-hmm. Heather moors and having bees like pollinate heather moors and whatnot, and it gives the honey a flavor.
Yes.
Does it all depend on which flowers that they're taking pollen from that determines how the honey tastes?
Absolutely, yeah. The majority of honey sold in the United States is clover honey, but honestly, they call it clover honey, but it should be classified as wildflower honey, because unless you can control exactly what flowers the bees are going to, it's wildflower honey, because it's going to be a mixture of different kinds. But what beekeepers and farmers will do is just plant acres and acres of the same type of flower. A lot of them is... there's a certain kind of scheme that you can set up the flowers in that it'll rotate through the crop, and the bees will never be without flowers. But then the farmers will sell the honey based on if it's an elderberry, a clover, wildflower, just different kinds of honey.
Do you have a favorite?
Clover honey is my favorite. It's just very sweet. But there's a very strong, I believe it's the elderberry. I'd probably have to look that up. But the elderberry tastes a little bit alcohol.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It's just got a very strong taste that most children generally don't like. But adults have somehow developed a flavor for it.
Do you ever observe uncharacteristic behavior in the bees? Like, will you ever see a worker do a drone's job or a drone do a worker's job?
Generally, they're very strict. They don't really like to break away from their things. We had a rat actually infiltrate the beehive once.
A rat?
And that's when all hands on deck, everyone's protecting the hive. Even the queen at one point was like, back up, dude. Like, this is my honey, my bees, get out of here. So if there's a huge tragedy, there will be a little shift and change. And also the bees will release certain pheromones during different levels of stress. And if it gets to that, like, red alert, everyone will do the protection job.
That's really cool.
But I've never seen, like, a drone go collect honey. Or go collect pollen, I mean, because they'll stay in and maintain the hive and keep the queen bee happy. But
what is you said if the earlier we saw the honeycomb, if it gets cold, the bees will walk in a square formation?
They'll rotate around to keep the air circulation. They'll do this in the heat too, to make sure that the hive stays cool. But in the summer they'll also swarm outside of the hive and just get out of the hive, because there's no reason for all these bees to be inside the hive if it's already hot. So it's kind of like kicking your kids out of the house.
Is that right?
Go on, guys, go play outside. The bees will just kind of hang outside until it cools down.
Will you ever see do bees always return to the same hive, or do they go rogue sometimes? Will they
Yes, they do sometimes go rogue, but all bees, and we can't pick up on these pheromones, but different hives have different scents, and if the wrong bee goes to the wrong hive, they're like, one of these things is not like the others, and they will attack that.
Does that
bee.
have to do with the flower that they're getting the pollen from?
Not necessarily. It's more like the DNA. If they came from this queen, they're all going to smell like the same queen. Yeah. And if a bee comes around that's not from that queen, it doesn't smell right, and they don't like that smell very much. They usually can't even get in the tube, they'll get stopped right at the entranceway because it's such a distinct smell to them. It'd be like if someone didn't take the garbage out for a week. As soon as you walk in the door, you're like, whoo!
Stop them.
Nope, you're not coming in here.
Step back, sir, or madam.
Exactly.
Silly question, do bees get along with wasps?
No, they do not. They do, and it'll usually take a lot more bees to take down a wasp than it will a wasp to take down a bee, because bees only have the one stinger, while wasps can have, I think it's six or nine. So the bees will try their best to just kind of tackle the wasp out there, but worst case scenario, they will have to use their stinger.
Now, this question's a little graphic in nature, but in the play, Roland, the character of Roland, discusses the fact that the drones are meant to have sex with the queen.
Yes.
And then once they do, their penis gets ripped off, and then they die. So my question is, why would that be, and who does the ripping?
It gets ripped off because they have those barbs that they can't bring it out. It's the same as if a bee were to sting you, they're not going to bring their stinger back because it gets ripped out of their body from the hook. So the bee's penis will hook and then get ripped out. And that's to ensure that it doesn't mate with the queen again, because then there's a chance of incest. And they don't want to mess up the genes. You know, they want to make sure every bee that comes out is a good worker or a good drone, and possibly a good queen, that one that will become a queen at some point. But they don't want to cross strands, you know.
Yeah, It's like Days of Our Hives.
Exactly.
It's a
I like that. I should write that down. I like that.
How long do the bees have to live after that happens? After they get ripped out?
Honestly, I'm not sure if I know the answer.
But it's not an immediate.
It's not like
dead right there.
No, they'll probably live. I want to say maximum a week, maybe 4 days.
Wow.
But because bees don't need to have sex to survive.
Right.
But having a gaping hole in your belly will, make life hard.
Yeah, sure will. Well, does the queen ever reject a drone?
I mean, she can be picky, yeah, but it's... No, I don't think so. I mean, she'll kind of, turn away, no, I'm not in the mood right now.
Is that really?
Yeah. And they'll have to, chase the queen through the hive, no, it's time, this is my job. And if she just wants to eat food, she'll kind of buzz them away, but eventually she will
Does
accept.
she realize that they're sacrificing their lives for her?
I don't think she cares.
Yeah.
She's the queen,
She's the queen, yeah.
Her way or the highway.
Have you ever been stung?
Yes. Very recently, setting up that art installation we just set up, we were all standing back and admiring our work, and at the same time we all started kind of swatting because some kind of pheromone was released when we went up to the hive, and then when we stood back, all the attackers were coming out to defend the hive, because we're a little scary to a little old bee.
Of course.
We're kind of giant monsters. So we did get attacked, and I got stung on my finger. But other people got stung multiple times. I was only stung the once.
Do you think, as a beekeeper, it's an occupational hazard that you are going to get stung at some point, and you just have to be okay with that?
If you haven't been stung yet, you're not a real beekeeper. If it's going to happen, you're getting really close to the bees, the best thing you can do is just make sure they're calm, try to give them a little space, and certainly not like a dog where you're wanting to interact with it every day. It's not a friendly pet to have, but it's a useful, fun pet to observe from a nice distance, which is why we have the glass case where people can get real close to it, but the bees are now kind of desensitized to people being right there.
Right there, yeah. That's awesome. I think I have a couple more. Aside from the drone having sex with the queen, do bees form relationships? And if so, are they monogamous?
Generally, no. They do not form relationships with each other. They're very much... busy as a bee is a good... they're very task-driven, and if they don't have a job to do immediately... they have backup jobs to do, and not a whole lot of time for socializing. The only socializing they ever really do is, hey, by the way, flowers are over here, and then really talk much.
Yeah.
Like ants will communicate a lot more with each other about what's going on in the hive than bees will. Rather than, so bees communicate, with the waggle dance and
The waggle dance.
The waggle dance.
Can you talk about that?
Yes, so they waggle, and that's their dance, and they'll do different shape dances based on the orientation of the sun. Bees are really, really good at knowing where the sun is. They've got that internal compass, I guess is the word that we can use, and even if the sun is setting, they know exactly where it is all the time. And so they will dance in a direction that will tell the other bees where the pollen is, where the flowers are, and based on how far they walk and how fast they shake, that's the distance. Yeah. So that's their form of communication, is doing that. And then their other form of communication is the pheromones, which we just recently discovered a new one, but we've got one for mating, defense, help defense.
Yeah.
And then what's that new one? It's so new, I've forgotten it. But I'm pretty sure it's be on guard, but I think we're okay, guys. And they recently discovered that because of how much we've been around bees. And yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they now are like, okay, like humans are kind of scary, but guys, I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So they've learned that
Yes.
not every human is going to crush them immediately.
And we're actually trying to help them, We're not putting pesticides in our gardens.
Do you think bees get lonely?
Yes.
Why?
There's so many of them, and there's not a whole lot of conversation. No one knows how their day is going. I'd be sad.
Do you talk to them?
I do. I spend a lot of time talking to the bees. It's like they're always surrounded by the whole hive, but they're not very personal, with each other. And sometimes you'll see that one bee go up just to get away from everyone.
Really?
And specifically during the winter, too, they will actually drive their own out of the hive just so they don't have to save as much honey as, if these extra bees were hanging around. So bees will get singled out and kicked out.
Wow.
You're not good enough for our hive anymore, and the only reason is because it's cold now.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed about you, but we don't want you anymore. And the bee hive will lose, I want to say 20% of its hive, during winter, just kicking their own out.
Really?
Because they can make new bees quick, but they don't want to waste the honey on keeping these alive.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah.
Does I don't know if there was anything else. How much honey do the bees need for themselves to live on?
Our bees currently did not make enough honey this year. There's a certain amount, depending on how many bees are in it. We have 3 combs, double-sided.
Yeah.
They'll need to make at least 2 for themselves. And this year, and I will admit that this is something that a lot of beekeepers have had to learn the hard way. If you harvest the honey, you have to make sure you leave enough for the bees. Because if you don't, you've doomed the hive. And they worked really hard for that honey to make it. But some beekeepers, inexperienced beekeepers, will harvest the honey and kill their own hives because they don't leave enough. And it's better to leave too much than not enough.
Is that a novice move?
Yes.
To do that? Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it happen before. It's very sad because there's nothing you can do about it. They won't eat imported honey. If you can't go to the store and pour some honey in there, they're like, nah, I'd rather die.
What's royal jelly?
Royal jelly is, it's a certain kind of flower, I believe. It's a very potent honey. And so the way that bees make honey is they ingest the nectar, keep it in their belly, and then regurgitate it into the hive, and then seal it off with a little bit of wax. And the way that it sits in there turns it into the honey. Yeah. The chemical reaction between their saliva regurgitation and the wax that they also create and spit up. Royal honey, All I know is that it is an incredibly strong, flavorful honey. I've heard on TV shows different things about it, but I'm not sure how much I would trust to that.
And we also discuss in the play the lifespan being 5 weeks to 6 months. Is that something that's natural, or are there other factors involved?
I mean, if a bee loses its life defending the hive from a wasp, then yeah, that has something to do with it. But bees, I mean, they'll die of old age after 6 months.
6 months would be old age for a bee.
Yeah, it's just a natural that they can pop them out so fast, you know.
Yeah.
But there's also like overcrowding. If a bee can't get into its hive because there's just too many other bees in there, then it'll be forced to sleep outside and be in the cold. There's predators. Someone might step on it. There's a lot of reasons for bees to die off pesticides. Pesticides are a big one.
Sure. And one other question.
Yes.
I've heard, and maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard that honey is the only food that never goes bad.
That's absolutely true.
If I had a jar of honey for 10 years, it would be fine, and I could eat it in 10 years.
We have honey from ancient Egyptians that's still fine to eat.
Wow.
It's all you have to do is reheat it. It might solidify and crystallize, but it's still fine. It's not expired. It's got a lot of good things in it, good for you. Vikings found out that you can even ferment honey if you do have honey go bad, and all it does is turn alcoholic. So honey can't go bad, and it's really cool.
That's amazing. One last thing, could you tell us anything that you specifically say to the bees, or any maybe
affirmations? Buzz, buzz, buzz.
Yeah, buzz, buzz. I like to make sure that their hive looks pretty, because it's hard to tell if the bees are happy. But if it looks pretty, maybe they're feeling okay. We talk a lot with the National Area Beekeeper Association, and just try to make sure that our hive is healthy. But I'll sit up every morning and I'll go talk to my bees while I'm drinking my coffee, and usually I'll just sit there and be like, "What are you doing there, buddy? Is there flowers that way?" And I'll try to figure out where they're trying to lead the other bees to. And it's so interesting because, like I said, while we were looking at the bees, all the bees will face the queen when they find the queen, and she'll usually walk around, and it's kind of like, it almost looks like a thing of respect that you face the queen instead of putting your tush towards her. You want to face her. But whenever you watch a bee do the waggle dance, other bees will come over, watch the dance, and then go. And you can actually see them kind of cycle through that. And it's just interesting, and I try to keep up with it. And I'm like, "Oh, where you going there, buddy?" And he's gone. Okay.
So part of your job description, not only to help keep the bees alive, is to make sure that they're happy. And that makes you happy.
It does make me happy. Bees are really cool, and save the bees.
Yeah.
Bees are cool, and if they go, we go. So I'd like to keep them happy.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Erin. That was
absolutely
exceptional.
Good luck. That's going to be a lot of fun to play a beekeeper, and I'm excited to hear that.
We are too. Thank you so much for doing this for us.